I have great pleasure in welcoming His Excellency Xavier Bettel, Prime Minister, Minister of State, Minister for Communications and Media, and the Minister for Religious Affairs of the Grand Duchy of Luxembourg. I invite him to address the Assembly.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Thank you for the people and the friends still in the room to be able to listen to my speech. La session.
Vice President, our debate on the topic of rebuilding trust and reigniting global solidarity, and quite rightly, you call on us to accelerate work underway to achieve the 2030 Agenda and its Sustainable Development Goals for peace, prosperity, progress and sustainability for all. You're calling on us to rebuild international peace and security, to show leadership in the fight against climate change, and to support efforts seeking to promote and guarantee the full enjoyment of human rights for all. Your priorities are also ours. To respond to global threats, from the war of aggression waged by Russia against Ukraine to climate change, from poverty to pandemics, we must act. We can't not do anything. We must act together as truly united nations. And indeed, what's important to say is to raise the question, what does it mean to be united? Because I have the impression that everyone has their own definition of what that means to be united today. The first thing, it means to be able to count on each other to be united. We know that there are some are bigger than others, and we are there to support each other. And I come from a country, Vice President, that is not the biggest. But we've always believed that union is doing something with others, and that makes us greater. It makes us stronger. And we're one of the founding members of this institution. We're also founder of the EU, of NATO, the OECD, the Council of Europe. And indeed, so we've always believed in the international order and the fact that we can work together to build something together. And as Europeans, we work day in, day out to defend the principles rooted in the UN Charter and indeed to strengthen multilateralism at a time when the majority of people think that solutions to current problems is to build walls, to cut off relations. I am one of those who is convinced that we want to build bridges. That is the way of finding solutions. So allow me first of all to speak about Luxembourg's assistance for sustainable development. We had the SDG summit, and this was held here a few days ago. And it reminded us, indeed, of the pressing need of redoubling our efforts if we want to achieve these SDGs by 2030. We've seen the devastating effects of the COVID-19 pandemic and the war waged by Russia. And all of this has led to indicators of poverty worsening in some developing countries. And we must continue in Luxembourg. We must continue to express this level of solidarity with others. For years now, we have allocated 1% of our GNI to overseas development assistance, and our support is focused on least developed countries and basic social protections. And I must admit, Vice President, we see in many European countries that one of the first budgets that we cut when we come to power is cooperation, because it's true, it's not very popular to say we're going to help someone at the other end of the world, whereas we have problems back at home. But we don't realise then that the problems that we have at home, believe me, they are luxury problems compared with other problems in countries around the world. And the problems that they have are a question of survival, whereas the majority of the time at home, they are things that sometimes we can do without occasionally. And that's something I am convinced of. And we've had the honour also to prepare with South Africa the high-level dialogue on financing for development, which was held on the 20th of September. And this indeed allowed us to identify ways of bridging the funding gap for the SDGs in partnership with international financial institutions and the private sector. And this is a question of mobilising resources that developing countries need to get out of debt and ensure funding. Our climate action, of course, it's not necessarily popular today, because as soon as we take measures, as soon as we change someone's day-to-day life, it doesn't go down well. We know that we have to change something, and it's not something that people like to see. But we will be judged by future generations if we do not shoulder our responsibilities today. So perhaps taking unpopular measures today, but if we want to keep a quality of life as we like to see it, we need to be aware of this. And those who don't believe in climate change, and I've heard people speak at this rostrum who doubt climate change almost. So I don't know what it's like at where you live, but we have tornadoes, floods, things that we did not have before. What we saw on the TV before, it happened elsewhere, the other end of the world, but now it's happening at home. And that is nothing compared with some colleagues, some heads of state and government in this room who don't know if their country will exist in the long term. Can you imagine? Coming from a country, saying that your country risks disappearing because icebergs are melting. Think about that. What do you want to build for how can you build for the future? How can you fight this? So we share the commitment of the Secretary General, and we aligned ourselves. I was lucky enough to be Prime Minister in 2015 for the Paris Agreement, and we need to continue to work towards this. We supported negotiations. Also, we will support negotiations at the COP28 to create a new loss and damage fund to help those most vulnerable countries. We're also strengthening our international climate funding. In addition to our ODA, our government has also decided, indeed, to increase Luxembourg's contribution to the Green Fund for Climate by 25% for the period 2024 to 2027. And we are also working in close collaboration with the European Investment Bank in the field of sustainable financing. Luxembourg's financial position, particularly its Luxembourg Green Exchange, emitted the first green bonds, and we've also mobilised private capital. And only yesterday in our embassy, we received a colleague from Cabo Verde and colleagues also from Rwanda. And together, we were able to show that we can connect public and private if we want to address things together. We can't do it alone as the public administration. We are really, if we want to do this, if we want to achieve this, we need to get the private sector on board. So you are welcome to Luxembourg to visit our country to see the different options that exist to bring together the public and the private to see that how we can make progress together. President.
And I just listened to the former speaker who spoke about human rights. I'm sure if we would ask all the delegates today what means human rights for one and the other, it's a shame that still in 2023, human rights depends where you are born. It depends of your religion. It depends if you're a girl or a boy. It depends of your sexual orientation. Today to know that depending on your place of birth, the human rights are different for the one than for the other is still a shame to have that in 2023. And it's not about human rights, it's also about civil rights, economic rights, rights to education, rights to be different. Rights of diversity, rights of women, rights of the capacity to choose yourself. And not that someone else thinks he knows better what is good for you. That's the reality still in 2023 when we speak about human rights and universal human rights and when we speak about United Nations. No, we are not united when we speak about human rights. The definition of human rights depends still today where you were born. And I can tell you that's not the best success that we have. And we still celebrate the 75th anniversary of the Declaration of the Human Rights. And for us, the defense of human rights for women and for children will stay a priority. And we are also proud to have supported an initiative about the decision also to create an institution for the people who disappeared in Syria. For us, you have to be we have to fight intolerance. And I would ask you just to be intolerant to intolerance. Is it still normal that nowadays in some political parties try to explain us, for example, that Second World War was not such a terrible period? Just go to Auschwitz and see what happened in Auschwitz, where millions of Jewish people were killed. They were killed because they were Jewish, they were gypsies, they were gays, or they were left-wings. Go there, you will see thousands and thousands of luggages. You will see crutches, you will see hairs, you will see glasses. And people were just a number. This was what happened on my continent. And we still today, some people think that this is just a small part of our history. I thought we would learn from the past when I see what happened also after Second World War. When you see today that being gay, being lesbian, being trans is still a death penalty. If you realize I'm myself gay, it's not my choice. I didn't wake up in the morning to ask myself, oh, why I'm gay today. The most difficult part was to accept myself. And so realize that being gay is not a choice, but being homophobic is a choice. And we have to fight against people who do not accept diversity in our nations. I could continue for all these different words about religions, about anti-Semitism, anti-difference, when we still speak about being a United Nations and wanting to share values together. We still have to play also a role in peace and international security. And when I see the situation in Africa, I have to tell you that I'm not assured about what happened. I have a special moment to think about my colleague, the President Bazoum. He was one of the stable countries as President of Niger. He's now in custody. I want to tell you that for us it was important to support also the African countries who condemned the coup. It is not the power of the strongest, of the one who has the weapons, who has to win against democrats. We have to continue to fight for this. When I speak about also here, is it normal that the procedures that we have in the United Nations makes it possible that a permanent member can block situations where we have all to agree that there is a problem? And again, last year I did already a message to the Russian delegations. Please listen to us and try to stop this unnecessary war. I belong to the few leaders I had calls with President Zelensky and with President Putin. I got criticized for having done this call, but I don't regret it. If we want to find solutions, we need to speak to the one and to the other. But when I realized that there was no will from Russian side to find the solutions, there was no will to save lives, I gave up. So the Russian delegations, please, there is no reason to kill innocent civilians, to rape women, to kill children. I grew up in peace. I never lived a war. But on my continent, still in ex-Yugoslavia, we had a war not that long time ago. And if I'm free in front of you, it's because other countries supported Luxembourg. I have an American military cemetery with thousands of young guys and girls. They didn't even know where my country was, and they died for me to be able to sit in a free country today. And that's the reason why we won't leave Ukraine alone. Ukraine has no choice, and we cannot accept that the power and this decision is the decision of the biggest neighbor who decides what is good for you. I had it in my life when Germany thought they would know what is better for Luxembourg than we do. And so we will continue to support Ukraine, and we want them leave alone. And we need to make it understand to the Russians that they did the wrong decisions. And we need also to sue. We cannot accept that crimes has been done and won't be punished. Dear friends, it's the 8th time that I'm able to make a speech in front of you, being Prime Minister now for 10 years, since 2013. And I'm proud about the contributions and the work my country has done also during this period in the United Nations. We have been an active member of the Security Council between 13 and 14, and during this strong experience we also wanted to re-propose a candidature in 2016 for the Security Council for 31-32. In 13 we also decided to be a candidate for the Council of Human Rights, and we've got elected in October 21 for the mandate 22-24. In October 22, we presented also our candidature for the Council Executive of UNESCO for the period 25-29. It's not to be candidate just to be candidate or to sit in a room. We want to have an added value when we put candidature also. We want to continue to fight for what I told you before. We want to continue for being united nations, what it means to be united. And if we have differences, to respect, but I try at least to convince, to exchange, and to move on to closer united nations than we have it done before, with young people, with a civil society. And we should think really about the procedures also, with the fact that with the procedures we had, usually we do procedures where everything is okay, but we realize then we have troubles with a permanent member, it is difficult to move on. And also, we have to give a voice to the African countries today in these institutions too. Dear President, just to conclude, we will be a united nation, as I told you before, where wherever you get born, wherever your parents did, whatever religions they have, whatever your sexual orientations will be, your political orientations will be, you will be able to have the same right to live, to be educated, and to be as you are, and not like other people would love you to be. Thank you so much.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the Prime Minister, Minister of State, Minister for Communications and Media, and Minister for Religious Affairs of the Grand Duchy of Luxembourg for the statement just made, and I request protocol to escort His Excellency. You will now hear